All right, let's kick this deep dive off. You know that feeling, right? That moment you settle in, ready to write some code, build a feature, fix a bug. You know what you need to do. But then you hit it, that invisible wall.
Hmm.
Maybe you're wrestling with a development environment that just won't cooperate, or you spend an hour hunting for a piece of documentation that seems to be trapped in a forgotten wiki from
Oh,
2018.
yeah. Or the build queue.
Or you push your code and the build takes forever.
Yeah.
And then it fails for some cryptic reason that sends you down a rabbit hole of logs.
Yep, been there.
That friction, that cognitive drag, that feeling that the system itself is actively working against your ability to just get things
Well,
done.
absolutely. It's the developer's version of wading through chest-deep mud
Right.
when all you want to do is sprint.
Yeah.
Every single one of those little barriers, those points of friction, they don't just slow you down physically. They break your focus, they increase mental overhead, and honestly, they just drain your enthusiasm for the work.
Exactly. And for the longest time, within a lot of companies, that friction was just accepted. It was seen as an unavoidable part of the job, something engineers grumbled about amongst themselves, but wasn't necessarily seen as a core business problem.
Right. Kind of the cost of doing business for software teams.
But something significant has fundamentally shifted. We've been given access to some fascinating source material today that makes a very powerful argument. This isn't just an engineering gripe anymore. It's moved squarely into the realm of strategic business priority, right up to the boardroom.
And the source material we're diving into today, a report, or perhaps a comprehensive article, titled The DevEx Revolution, a Strategic Priority, lays out a compelling case. It argues that how a company designs and maintains the day-to-day environment and workflows for its software developers is no longer a secondary concern.
No longer nice to have.
Not at all. It directly impacts the company's performance, its innovation velocity, and its ability to compete effectively in a software-driven world. It's not just about making developers happy in a soft sense. It's about unlocking fundamental business value and removing costly inefficiencies.
That's right. So our mission for this deep dive, based on the sources you've shared with us, is to really unpack this concept. We want to extract the key insights on why leading companies are investing heavily in this area, what developer experience, or DevEx, as the source material consistently refers to, it actually encompasses.
Hmm.
And critically, why it's become such a vital factor for everything from individual productivity and team innovation to, perhaps most surprisingly for some, talent retention.
And the source material sets the stage beautifully by highlighting a crucial evolution in how we think about measuring success in software development, especially as we look towards 2025 and beyond. It makes an explicit point that developer productivity isn't, or shouldn't be, measured by outdated or misleading metrics like lines of code written,
Right, the classic vanity metric.
or arbitrary points completed in a sprint, which can often incentivize the wrong behaviors.
Right, those are output proxies, but not necessarily indicators of real value being delivered.
Exactly. The source argues that the real measure of productivity has shifted. It's about the speed and efficiency with which developers can solve complex problems, translate business needs into functional software, deliver tangible value to customers, and perhaps most importantly, maintain that state of deep focus and high effectiveness, what many call being in the flow.
Ah, the flow state.
It's about minimizing interruptions, removing roadblocks, and enabling developers to concentrate their cognitive energy on the creative, problem-solving parts of their job, rather than fighting the system.
That flow state is so critical. Anyone who's ever experienced it knows how powerful it is. Hours can feel like minutes, and complex tasks seem manageable. Conversely, being constantly yanked out of flow by tooling issues or process hurdles is incredibly frustrating and inefficient.
Totally derails you.
And the source material calls this shift, this growing recognition of DevEx's importance, a quiet revolution. It's quietly transforming the focus from just the external product users interact with to the internal environment developers work within, elevating it to a strategic, first-class priority for the entire organization, not just the engineering department.
It's taking something that was often viewed as backstage and putting it front and center. So with that context set, let's really dig into what DevEx actually is, according to this source material.
Okay, let's unpack the definition provided. What does the source say constitutes developer experience?
Well, the source material dedicates an entire section to defining this, emphasizing that DevEx is incredibly broad. It's described as encompassing everything that impacts a developer's ability to do their best work from the moment they start their day to the moment they deploy code to production and, beyond.
Everything feels very comprehensive. Can you break down some of the key components it lists?
Absolutely. The source material is quite specific here. It includes, first, tools and workflows.
Okay, the basics, like IDEs.
Right. IDEs, build systems, code repositories, issue tracking software, communication tools. But crucially, it's also about how seamlessly all of these integrate and interact.
So not just the tool, but how it fits.
Exactly. Are they intuitive? Are they fast? Do they require excessive context switching? That sort of thing.
Makes sense. What else?
Then there's CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration and continuous deployment.
Right, the automation backbone.
Yeah. How fast and reliable are those automated processes that take code from a developer's machine through testing and eventually to production? Are failures clear and easy to debug? Is the whole process painful or smooth?
A slow or flaky pipeline is a major drag. I get that.
Oh, definitely.
Mm.
Then documentation, big one.
Ah, yes, the eternal challenge.
Is necessary information about code bases, APIs, systems, processes accurate, easy to find, and well-structured? Or is it scattered, outdated, and just tribal knowledge held by a few people?
Which happens way too often. Okay, what's next on the list?
APIs and SDKs. So how easy is it for developers to understand and integrate with internal services or third-party platforms? Are they well-documented, stable, intuitive?
Basically, are your building blocks easy to work with?
Precisely. Next is internal support.
Like when you get stuck.
Yeah. When developers hit a wall, whether it's an infrastructure issue, a weird bug in a shared library, or just a question about a complex process, how easy is it to get timely, helpful support? Is there a clear path?
Or are you just shouting into the void?
Right. Then there's cognitive load. This is a critical one. The source highlights, maybe less tangible.
Cognitive load, so the mental effort involved.
Exactly. The mental overhead involved in just doing the job. Do developers have to remember dozens of different commands or URLs? Is the system architecture overly complex or poorly understood? Are they constantly interrupted or juggling too many things?
That feeling of having too much rattling around in your head just to do the basic task.
That's it. High cognitive load is a direct impediment to flow and productivity. And finally, the source lists autonomy.
Autonomy, so the freedom to act.
Yeah. Does the developer have the ability to make decisions and implement changes without excessive bureaucracy or gatekeeping?
Mm.
Can they move forward efficiently, or do they constantly need external approvals for routine tasks?
Wow, okay. That list really underscores how holistic DevEx is. It goes far beyond just the coding environment itself. It's the entire ecosystem, the tools, the processes, the information available, the support structure, and even the mental energy required to navigate it all.
Precisely. And the source material hammers this point home with a very direct and impactful statement in this section.
Yeah.
It explicitly says DevEx is not a nice-to-have afterthought. It is the foundation of engineering output.
The foundation. That's a really strong word choice. What are the implications of calling it the foundation?
Well, the implication is profound, isn't it? If the foundation is weak, anything you try to build on top of it will be unstable, inefficient, and ultimately limited. You could have the most brilliant engineers, cutting-edge algorithms, a killer product vision, but if the underlying DevEx is poor, if the tools are clunky, the processes are slow, docs are missing, cognitive load is through the roof.
Then the output suffers.
Right. The output will be constrained. Developers will spend less time building value and more time fighting the system. The source material is essentially saying that a strong DevEx is a prerequisite for high-performing engineering teams and, by extension, for a successful software business.
It's like trying to build a high-performance race car, but the garage is cluttered, the tools are rusty, and you have to walk 2 miles to get a simple wrench.
Exactly. You're never going to hit top speed.
So, for you, the listener, understanding this broad definition is key because it reframes the conversation. DevEx isn't just about whether a developer likes their IDE. It's about recognizing that every single interaction a developer has with their environment, their tools, their colleagues, and their processes contributes to their overall ability to function effectively. It's about the difference between feeling empowered and enabled versus feeling constantly hindered.
It's the difference between building with Legos that snap together perfectly versus trying to assemble something with mismatched, ill-fitting pieces. The quality of the building blocks and how easily they connect directly impacts the speed and quality of the final creation.
Okay, so we have a clear definition of what DevEx is and why the source material calls it the foundation. But, as we mentioned earlier, this used to be an engineering problem. Chapter 2 of the source material explains why this has fundamentally changed and why company boardrooms are now paying attention. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, this section dives into the strategic shift. The core argument presented is that in today's economy, business execution is, in large part, software execution. The speed at which a company can innovate, respond to market changes, deliver new features, and maintain reliable services is directly tied to its ability to build and deploy software effectively.
Which means any inefficiency in the software development lifecycle has a direct impact on business outcomes.
Exactly. The source material makes it very clear. Every minute a developer spends waiting for a build, debugging a complex environment setup, searching for information, or navigating a painful deployment process isn't just lost developer time.
It's more than just annoyance.
Oh yeah, it's lost business momentum. It's slower time to market for new products or features. It's delayed bug fixes impacting customers. It costs money, and it erodes competitive advantage in real time.
So the friction we felt at the start isn't just annoying, it's a direct drag on the company's ability to execute its strategy.
Precisely. And the source material doesn't just make this theoretical claim. It provides a concrete use case to illustrate the point, citing a leading cloud SaaS provider.
Oh,
This company didn't just acknowledge DevEx, they made a substantial strategic investment in improving it.
What kind of investment did they make, according to the source, and what were the tangible results?
The source details that this SaaS provider made a significant investment in building an internal developer platform. This wasn't just buying off-the-shelf tools, it was about creating a curated, integrated set of tools and services designed specifically to make common developer tasks easier and more efficient within their specific environment.
So like building their own internal paved road.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it as building a streamlined, self-service internal infrastructure layer. And the results they achieved were quite dramatic and, crucially, measurable in business terms.
Measurable is key for the boardroom pitch.
Absolutely. The source highlights several key metrics that saw significant improvement. First, the time it took for teams to onboard a new microservice onto their platform, ready for production traffic, was cut drastically. It went from an average of 4 weeks down to just 2 days.
4 weeks to 2 days, that's huge, a reduction of 93%. Think about the business impact of that. If a team has a new service ready, they can start building features on it or offering it to customers almost immediately, instead of waiting a month just to get the infrastructure sorted. That's incredible speed gain.
It really is. And the benefits didn't stop there. According to the source, their deployment frequency doubled. Teams were able to push code changes to production twice as often as before.
Doubling deployment frequency means they can iterate faster, release features more frequently, respond to market feedback rapidly, and deploy critical bug fixes or security patches much quicker. That's a direct impact on the pace of innovation and stability.
And then there was a third, equally significant outcome mentioned. Attrition among their developer workforce dropped by 30%.
30% reduction in developer turnover. That is massive. Developer talent is highly sought after, expensive to recruit, and slow to replace. Losing experienced engineers means losing critical knowledge, slowing down remaining teams, and incurring substantial hiring and onboarding costs. A 30% reduction in that is a huge win for the business, not just the engineering culture.
It fundamentally impacts the bottom line, both by avoiding costs and by preserving the capacity for future innovation. This example, as presented in the source material, perfectly illustrates the key takeaway from this section. DevEx isn't just about making developers comfortable. While the retention numbers clearly show a positive impact on morale, the primary case made to the boardroom is that DevEx is a direct lever for faster business execution, improved operational performance, like deployment speed, and has a measurable, tangible ROI.
It speaks the language of business value, speed, efficiency, cost savings, and talent retention.
That's the language they understand.
It totally changes the framing. It's no longer an engineering team saying, we need better tools. It's the business saying, we need better DevEx because it will make us more agile, more competitive, and help us keep the skilled people we need to build our future. That shift in perspective is revolutionary in itself.
It elevates the internal developer environment from a cost center or a support function to a strategic asset that directly contributes to revenue, profitability, and competitive advantage.
And the source material identifies a key organizational trend that enables companies to achieve this kind of transformation and impact: the rise of dedicated platform engineering teams. This is covered in the next section.
Yes, the source highlights platform engineering as a direct response to the need for improved DevEx at scale. These aren't just traditional ops or infrastructure teams, Their mandate, as described, is specifically to build reusable services, workflows, and abstractions for the internal developer community.
Reusable services, workflows, abstractions. Can you elaborate on what that means in practice? Like, what are they actually building?
Sure. Think about the common tasks product developers need to do repeatedly. Setting up a new service repository, configuring continuous integration, provisioning a database instance, setting up monitoring, implementing standard security checks, deploying to a staging environment.
All the stuff you need around the actual feature code.
Exactly. In organizations without good DevEx and platform teams, every product team might have to figure out how to do this themselves, potentially reinventing the wheel every time, using different tools, making different mistakes.
Which leads to inconsistency, slowdowns, and fragmentation, right back to that tool sprawl idea we might get to later.
Exactly. Platform engineering teams step in to build standardized self-service solutions for these common needs. They create the paved roads and guardrails mentioned in the source material.
Paved roads and guardrails. I like that analogy.
Yeah. The paved road is the easy, recommended path for doing things like setting up a new service that's automated, uses best practices, and integrates smoothly with other systems. The guardrails prevent teams from accidentally driving off-road into configuration drift, security vulnerabilities, or non-standard practices that create future operational headaches.
So they're building an internal infrastructure product designed specifically for their colleagues, the application developers.
Precisely. And the source material provides a use case from a large e-commerce firm that exemplifies this. This company invested in a dedicated platform team that built a sophisticated self-service portal.
A portal. Okay. What could product developers do through this portal? What was the user experience like?
Well, through this single unified portal, developers could perform complex tasks that used to require manual tickets, waiting on other teams, or maybe wrestling with complex command line scripts. For example, they could instantly scaffold a new microservice project using predefined templates that included standard libraries, configuration, and CI pipeline definitions.
So click a button, get a working skeleton service.
Pretty much. They could provision necessary cloud resources, like databases or queues with standardized settings and permissions. They could even trigger automated compliance checks required before production deployment, all through a simple interface.
So tasks that might have taken days of coordination or manual work became self-service and almost instant. What was the impact on the developers using this?
The impact, according to the source material, was striking and particularly visible in onboarding. They found that new developers joining the company were able to ship their first pull request, that first piece of code, reviewed and merged into the main code base on day 2 of joining, instead of waiting until week 2 or later.
Day 2 instead of week 2, that's an acceleration of almost 2 full weeks just to get a new hire to make their first meaningful contribution.
Right.
That's incredible for early productivity and morale. Think about the cost savings and the speed of integrating new talent.
It's a massive gain in time to contribution. And this use case really solidifies the core philosophy that the source material says drives successful platform teams.
Yeah.
They explicitly treat internal developers as their customers.
Customers, not just colleagues or ticket fillers.
Right. By understanding their internal customers' needs, pain points, and common workflows, and by building high-quality, easy-to-use internal products that address those needs, they create immense leverage. Their work multiplies the productivity and efficiency of every product team that uses the platform.
It flips the perspective from internal infrastructure being a cost or a necessary evil to it being a product that enables the velocity of the entire engineering organization. It's a strategic enabler. And speaking of onboarding, that example highlights its importance. Chapter 4 in the source material zooms in specifically on developer onboarding as a critical benchmark for DevEx.
And it makes perfect sense why. As the source material points out, your first experience joining a company or a new team is incredibly influential. It sets the tone for your entire tenure. The source calls onboarding a critical microcosm of the broader DevEx.
A microcosm, a small system that reflects the characteristics of the larger one, like a preview.
Exactly. How easy or difficult it is to get your development environment set up, gain access to necessary systems and code repositories, find the right documentation, and make your first successful code contribution is a direct, tangible indicator of the underlying quality of the entire DevEx. If onboarding is smooth, it suggests the tooling, documentation, access controls, and support systems are likely well designed. If it's a painful, confusing process, it's a flashing red light indicating systemic DevEx issues.
And the problem with painful, slow onboarding, beyond just being frustrating for the new person.
The source material is clear. It wastes valuable time from highly paid, skilled individuals. You've hired someone talented, eager to contribute, and for days or even weeks, they are stuck navigating bureaucracy, fighting with setup scripts, or waiting for permissions.
That's lost productivity right out of the gate.
Mhm. Furthermore, as the source notes, it can severely kill that early engagement and enthusiasm. You come in excited to solve problems and build things, only to be immediately bogged down in frustrating administrative hurdles.
It's a direct hit to both productivity and morale right at the most critical juncture when someone is forming their first impressions. The source provides another compelling use case here, this time from a fintech company that decided to tackle their onboarding process head-on.
Right. This fintech company, recognizing the pain points, made a dedicated effort to optimize their developer onboarding. The first step, according to the source, was simply mapping out the actual end-to-end process a new developer had to go through.
Mapping the process that sounds like basic process improvement, but often overlooked in complex tech environments, right?
Exactly. And what they discovered through this mapping, as the source highlights, was quite astonishing. They found 17 redundant steps in their developer onboarding flow.
17 redundant steps.
Yeah, steps that were unnecessary, duplicated effort, or could be automated entirely.
17. Imagine the frustration of going through 17 things that didn't need to be there. Just why?
It's baffling, but maybe not surprising, in systems that have evolved organically over time without clear ownership. After they identified and systematically simplified or removed these redundant steps, the source reports a dramatic impact on a key metric. The time it took for a new hire to make their first successful code merge dropped by 65%.
65% faster time to first successful merge. That's potentially taking weeks off the time it takes for a new hire to become a fully contributing member of a team. That is a powerful, measurable win for both the individual developer and the business's capacity.
It really reinforces the key takeaway from the source material in this section. You never get a second chance at a first experience. Onboarding success isn't just a nice to have, it's a clear, measurable benchmark of your DevEx quality. It shows whether your internal systems are designed to get people productive quickly or whether they are hindrances.
And if you can fix onboarding, it suggests you can probably fix other areas of DevEx too.
It's often a high-leverage place to start.
It provides tangible evidence of the impact of improving DevEx, and it naturally leads us to consider what happens after onboarding. Chapter 5, in the source material, addresses a critical outcome of poor DevEx that resonates deeply with individual developers and impacts the business long-term. Bad DevEx is a significant retention risk.
Yes, while the business case for speed and efficiency is compelling for executives, the source material acknowledges that DevEx has a profound human dimension. The reality, as observed in the report, is that talented developers aren't solely motivated by salary or job titles. While compensation is important, it's often not the primary reason someone leaves a job if they're otherwise happy.
So it's not always about the money. What else drives skilled developers away, according to the source?
The source points directly to the daily frustrations caused by poor DevEx. Developers leave when they're constantly battling clunky, outdated, or ineffective tools. They leave when there's a persistent lack of clarity around development environments, system architecture, or standard processes. And they leave when core workflows, like the CI/CD pipeline, are slow, unreliable, and painful to use.
So the constant friction just wears them down.
Exactly. They seek environments where tools are enabling, information is accessible, and processes are streamlined, in short, places with better DevEx.
So the daily grind, the constant little frustrations, they accumulate and become major factors in someone deciding to look for a new job. It's not just about a bad boss or a lack of promotion. It's the sheer difficulty of doing the work itself.
Absolutely. And the source material provides a compelling use case from a unicorn startup that learned this lesson the hard way. This company, which likely offered competitive salaries and exciting work, noticed a worrying trend. Their senior developers, critical to their engineering capability and culture, were starting to depart.
Losing senior talent is particularly damaging. They are the architects, the mentors, the ones with deep system knowledge. That hurts.
Precisely. So, to understand why, the company conducted thorough exit interviews with these departing senior engineers, and the findings, as reported in the source material, were consistent and revealing. The core reasons cited for leaving were recurring frustrations related to the company's DevEx.
Ah, so it came out in the interviews.
Yes. Specifically mentioned were outdated or legacy tooling that felt inefficient, development environments that were difficult to set up and manage, and painfully slow and unreliable CI/CD systems that made deploying code a source of constant stress and delay.
They weren't leaving for a bit more money. They were leaving for companies they believed offered a better daily experience, a more developer-first environment where they could actually build things efficiently.
That's exactly the conclusion drawn in the source material. The key takeaway here is powerful. The investment in DevEx isn't just about increasing throughput or speed. It's fundamentally about retaining your most valuable asset, your talented, experienced people.
Right.
Poor DevEx is a direct driver of voluntary attrition among developers, which is incredibly costly in terms of lost productivity, knowledge, and hiring expenses. Investing in DevEx is therefore a critical talent retention strategy.
It reframes DevEx from purely an efficiency play to also being a crucial component of employee satisfaction and long-term organizational capacity. Now, with all this talk of tools and platforms, one might jump to the conclusion that the solution is simply to acquire the latest, most advanced tools available. But Chapter 6 in the source material introduces a critical nuance. Tooling does not equal experience, and context matters immensely.
This section of the source material serves as a crucial counterpoint to a potentially simplistic view. It pushes back strongly against the idea that just buying or implementing more or newer tools will automatically improve developer experience. In fact, it warns that this approach can often make things worse.
How does simply adding more tools make things worse? That seems counterintuitive.
Well, the source material explains that blindly adding tools without a coherent strategy, without addressing the underlying workflows and friction points, leads to tool sprawl.
Tool sprawl. Okay, I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, it's a common phenomenon where an organization ends up with multiple tools that serve similar purposes, often with overlapping capabilities, but different interfaces, configurations, and workflows.
So instead of simplifying things, you introduce complexity because now developers have to figure out which tool to use for a given task and learn multiple ways of doing essentially the same thing, and maybe they conflict.
Precisely. Tool sprawl creates divergent workflows across teams, inconsistency in how things are done, and significantly increases cognitive burden. Developers waste mental energy just trying to remember which tool is the sanctioned one for a particular task in their context, navigating different UIs and keeping track of different configurations. The source material emphasizes that more features don't equal a better experience if the overall system is chaotic.
It's the paradox of choice combined with lack of integration. You have lots of options, but none of them work together smoothly, and you're never quite sure if you're using the right one or the one your teammate is using.
Exactly. And the source material provides a vivid use case to illustrate the negative impact of tool sprawl, detailing a mid-sized enterprise's descent into CI/CD hell.
CI/CD hell sounds appropriately dramatic. What happened there?
According to the source, this enterprise had, over time, adopted 4 different overlapping CI tools across various departments or projects. Each tool had its own way of defining pipelines, handling dependencies, reporting status, and integrating with other systems.
4 separate continuous integration systems.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a recipe for confusion and inconsistency.
It was. The result, as described in the source material, was massive confusion, inconsistent build and deployment workflows across the organization, and a complete lack of standardization. Teams struggled to understand each other's pipelines, making collaboration and knowledge sharing difficult. And the impact. Productivity actively dropped, according to the source.
Dropped. So it wasn't just stagnant, it got worse.
Yes. Any potential gains from the individual tools were negated by the friction and complexity introduced by having too many unintegrated options. The tool sprawl became a net negative on their ability to deliver software. How did they begin to fix this CI/CD hell?
The source notes that the solution required the intervention of a dedicated platform team. This team didn't necessarily rip out all 4 tools overnight. Instead, they focused on building a unified, abstracted layer on top of the existing infrastructure. They created standardized pipeline templates and workflows that developers could use, regardless of which underlying CI tool was executing the job.
Ah, so they provided a consistent interface.
Exactly. They provided a single interface and a consistent experience. They built coherence on top of the underlying chaos.
Okay, that makes sense. Focus on the developer's experience, not the specific tool underneath.
Exactly. They focused on the experience provided to the developer, abstracting away the underlying tooling complexity. And this is the fundamental key takeaway from the source material in this section. DevEx is not about the sheer quantity of tools or features you offer. It's about the coherence and integration of the developer's workflow. A unified, clear, a well-integrated experience, even with slightly less feature-rich tools, is vastly superior to a fragmented landscape of powerful but disconnected systems.
Context integration and a focus on the end-to-end workflow beat complexity and feature overload every single time.
That's the message.
That use case really drives that point home. It's about the symphony, not just the individual instruments. So if coherence is the goal, and we know DevEx impacts everything from speed and innovation to retention and avoiding tool sprawl, how do you actually know if your efforts are working? How do you measure DevEx effectively? Chapter 7 in the source material dives into this critical question.
This is a vital section because, as is true in any business area, you can't effectively manage or improve something if you're not measuring it, right?
Right. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it.
Exactly. The source material acknowledges the challenge in measuring something as holistic as DevEx, but it identifies several key metrics that, when considered together and in context, provide valuable insights.
Okay. What are some of those key metrics that the source says are important for tracking DevEx?
The source material lists a mix of quantitative and qualitative indicators. Key metrics identified include time to first PR commit.
We saw that with the onboarding example.
Yes, especially for new hires. It measures how quickly someone can get their environment set up and make their initial contribution, reflecting onboarding efficiency.
Makes sense. What else?
Deployment frequency. As we discussed earlier, this is how often code is successfully deployed to production. A higher frequency often indicates smoother, less painful deployment processes and smaller, less risky changes.
So how often can you ship?
Right. Then, lead time for changes. This tracks the total time elapsed from when a code change is committed to the version control system until it is running successfully in the production environment.
So commit to production, the whole cycle time.
Exactly. It's a holistic measure of the speed of the entire development and delivery pipeline. Then there's developer satisfaction.
The softer side. How do you measure that?
It's qualitative, often captured through regular surveys, interviews, or feedback mechanisms. Are developers happy with their tools, processors, and environment? Do they feel empowered or frustrated?
Just asking them. Seems obvious, but maybe overlooked.
It can be. Then there's on-call load and mean time to recovery, or MTTR.
Operational metrics. How does that relate to DevEx?
Well, the frequency and intensity of on-call rotations and how quickly incidents can be resolved. High on-call burden and slow recovery times often point to underlying issues in system reliability, observability, how easy it is to see what's going on, or the difficulty of debugging in the production environment.
So if it's hard to figure out what broke and fix it, that's bad DevEx impacting operations.
Precisely.
Yeah.
All aspects of DevEx.
Yeah.
And finally, cognitive load again.
Right, the mental overhead. How do they suggest measuring that?
It's subjective, the source notes, but it can be assessed through observations, surveys, and proxy metrics, like the number of tools used daily, the frequency of context switching required for common tasks, or the difficulty reported in finding necessary information.
So you look for signs of mental juggling or confusion.
Kind of, yeah.
That's a comprehensive set of metrics, combining the external outcomes, speed, reliability, with the internal experience, satisfaction, cognitive load. The source material seems to advocate for a blended approach.
Exactly. And it provides a use case from a startup that successfully implemented this blended approach using a DevEx scorecard.
A scorecard just for developer experience. How did that work? What did it look like?
The source material describes this startup scorecard as integrating both industry-standard DORA metrics, those well-known measures of software delivery performance like deployment frequency and lead time.
Okay, the standard delivery metrics.
With the feedback gathered directly from internal developer satisfaction surveys.
So they weren't just looking at the raw numbers. They were correlating the delivery metrics with how developers felt about their process.
Precisely. And the benefits, according to the source, were significant. The scorecard clearly revealed bottlenecks in their end-to-end development process, providing data-driven insights into where friction existed.
So it pointed them to the problems.
Right. This data was then used to inform and prioritize the roadmap for their internal platform teams, showing them exactly which DevEx improvements would have the biggest measurable impact. And, importantly, having the scorecard help drive higher adoption of the new, helpful platform tools they were building.
Why? How did it drive adoption?
Because developers could see that leadership was measuring and prioritizing their experience, and the data showed the platform was actually helping improve those metrics they cared about.
It created a positive feedback loop. The data from the scorecard validated the need for platform investment, guided the platform team's work, and encouraged developers to adopt the very solutions designed to help them.
It transformed DevEx from a nebulous concept into a measurable and actionable area for improvement. The key takeaway from the source material here is that while measurement is essential for improvement, DevEx metrics require careful interpretation and context. A number alone doesn't tell the whole story.
Right. It's not just the what, but the why.
Exactly. You need to understand the why behind the data, often by combining quantitative metrics with qualitative feedback from the developers living the experience. It's not just data, it's data storytelling.
That emphasis on understanding the human element behind the numbers is a recurring theme, and it connects nicely to the next point in the source material, Chapter 8, which describes a fundamental shift in how internal tooling and DevEx initiatives are approached, moving from support to product thinking.
This is a critical mindset change highlighted by the source. Traditionally, internal tools and infrastructure support were often treated reactively.
Like IT support, almost. Fix it when it breaks.
Kind of, yeah. Something breaks, you fix it. A team needs a specific piece of infrastructure, they open a ticket and wait. These internal systems were often underfunded, lacked dedicated ownership or a long-term vision, and were built more out of necessity than strategic design. They were seen as necessary evils, part of the operational overhead. Just keeping the lights on.
So, built by whoever had a moment, maybe not well documented, no focus on user experience or future growth, just trying to keep the lights on.
Exactly. There was no strategic approach to making these tools and systems truly enabling for the developers who use them every day. But the source material describes an evolution in leading companies. They are now applying proper product management principles and practices to their internal developer tools and platforms.
Product management for internal tools, like they would for the software they sell to external customers.
Definitely. Precisely. The source material provides the use case of a leading fintech company that took this approach. Recognizing the strategic importance of their internal platform and tools for developer velocity, they assigned dedicated product managers specifically to their internal DevEx initiatives and platform teams.
Dedicated product managers for internal tools. Okay. What did these internal DevEx product managers actually do? What does that role look like?
Well, just like product managers for customer-facing products, their responsibilities included developing and maintaining a clear roadmap for the internal platform.
Okay, a roadmap.
Establishing continuous feedback loops with their internal developer users through surveys, interviews, user groups, prioritizing features based on user needs and business impact.
So talking to the customers.
And even conducting user testing of new internal tools or features before rolling them out widely.
So they were treating the internal developers with the same level of attention, research, and strategic planning as they would a paying customer. Understanding their pain points, needs, and desired workflows became the basis for planning the internal tools.
Yes, they weren't just building what engineering thought was needed, they were building what their internal customers, the product developers, actually needed to be effective. And the impact of this shift, as noted in the source material, was significant. Developers within the company began treating these internal tools with the same respect, reliance, and expectation of quality that they would a high-quality external product they chose to use.
They started trusting them more.
Yeah, they trusted the tools, knew they would evolve based on feedback, and saw them as valuable aids rather than frustrating hurdles.
That cultural shift where internal tools are seen as valuable products with ownership and a future is huge. It elevates them from the basement to being core to the business's capability. The key takeaway from the source material here is powerful and clear. DevEx is a product in itself. For it to be successful, widely adopted, and truly impactful in driving organizational performance, it needs dedicated ownership, a clear vision and strategy, a well-defined roadmap, and the resources necessary to develop and maintain it with the same rigor as any product sold to external customers.
Right. It cannot thrive if treated merely as a reactive support function or an engineering afterthought.
It requires a fundamental reclassification in the minds of leadership and within the organizational structure. It moves internal infrastructure from being a cost center to being an investment in a product whose users are the engine of the business.
Well said. It's a product mindset for internal enablement.
Speaking of engines and potential accelerators, the source material also touches on a major contemporary topic in Chapter 9, the role of artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, LLMs, in DevEx. Can AI solve our DevEx problems, or does it just add noise? What does the source say?
Well, the source material addresses this question with a nuanced perspective, as you might expect. It acknowledges the significant promise that AI-powered tools, like code assistants such as GitHub Copilot, AWS Code Whisperer, or tools integrated into IDEs, hold for potentially enhancing developer experience.
And what is that potential or promise according to the source? How can AI help DevEx?
The promise lies in their ability to automate or accelerate certain coding tasks. LLMs can provide intelligent code suggestions, automatically write boilerplate code based on comments or function names, help with refactoring complex sections of code, generate basic unit tests,
Okay.
and even explain unfamiliar code snippets or error messages. All of this has the potential to reduce tedious manual work, speed up coding, and lower cognitive load on certain tasks.
That sounds like a direct win for DevEx. Less time writing repetitive code, more time focused on unique logic and problem solving.
It certainly has that potential. However, the source material is careful to highlight a crucial risk and limitation. It explicitly states that AI, particularly LLMs, is not a magic bullet.
Not a silver bullet, then?
No, not a silver bullet that can fix fundamentally broken developer experiences or poor underlying engineering practices.
What's the risk, then, if you introduce AI into an environment with poor DevEx or shaky foundations?
The risk, as outlined in the source, is that without strong engineering fundamentals already firmly in place, things like well-structured and up-to-date documentation, comprehensive automated test suites, clear code ownership, and a well-understood system architecture, LLMs can actually amplify bad patterns and existing technical debt.
Amplify bad patterns. How does that happen? Like, make things worse faster?
Kind of, yeah. If an LLM is trained on a code base that is inconsistent, poorly structured, or contains existing bugs and vulnerabilities, its suggestions may perpetuate or even accelerate the spread of those bad practices. If tests are inadequate, the AI might generate code that appears correct but is actually buggy, and there's no safety net to catch it. Essentially, AI learns from what exists. If what exists is messy or flawed, the AI's output might reflect and multiply that mess.
So instead of cleaning up the mess, it just builds more on top of it, making the problem harder to untangle later. Garbage in, garbage out, amplified.
Exactly. And the source material also points out another important factor. Not all developers, particularly those who are less experienced, may have the necessary domain knowledge or critical judgment to effectively evaluate the AI's output.
So they might just trust the AI too much.
Right. They might accept suggestions without fully understanding them, potentially introducing subtle bugs or security issues that are hard to trace back. They might not know when to question or ignore the AI.
They might lack the context or experience to critically assess the AI's suggestions.
Precisely. Therefore, the key takeaway from the source material regarding AI's role is nuanced but vital. LLMs and AI tools can absolutely enhance DevEx and significantly boost developer productivity.
Okay, so there is upside.
But only when they are introduced into a healthy developer ecosystem that already possesses strong engineering practices, good code hygiene, comprehensive testing, and solid documentation.
So prerequisite conditions apply.
Absolutely. They function best as accelerators and augmentations on top of a solid foundation. They do not replace the need for that foundation. They can make good developers faster and more efficient within well-managed systems, but they risk making struggling developers or chaotic systems even worse.
So the message is clear. Fix your underlying DevEx fundamentals first, ensure strong engineering practices, and then look to AI tools to amplify those strengths. Don't try to use AI to paper over existing cracks or compensate for a poor environment.
A perfect summary. AI is a powerful tool, but its effectiveness in DevEx is contingent on the quality of the environment it's integrated into. And all of these efforts we've discussed, building platform teams, optimizing onboarding, measuring DevEx, applying product thinking to internal tools, leveraging AI effectively, they all require one final, crucial ingredient highlighted in the source material's concluding sections: executive buy-in.
The missing link, as the source material might suggest, or perhaps the capstone.
Exactly. Or the enabler. The source material observes a persistent challenge in many organizations. DevEx improvements are often seen as concerns solely within the engineering department. Engineering teams advocate for better tools, fight for resources to build internal platforms, push for process improvements, but they often face resistance or struggle to gain the necessary budget and cross-functional support.
Why?
Because the importance of DevEx isn't fully understood or prioritized at the highest levels of the company.
It remains a cost center or a technical niche rather than a recognized driver of business value in their eyes.
Precisely. The source argues that DevEx initiatives only truly gain the necessary momentum, investment, and organizational priority when their strategic importance is recognized and championed by senior leadership. This happens when CTOs, COOs, or even the CEO understand that DevEx is not just about developer comfort, but about the fundamental speed, quality, and capacity of the business to execute its strategy through software.
So how do companies actually achieve this elevation? How do they get DevEx onto the executive agenda and secure that crucial buy-in? Does the source give examples?
It does. The source material provides a compelling use case illustrating one effective method. A company that directly tied specific DevEx initiatives to executive-level OKRs, objectives, and key results.
OKRs. So using the same strategic goal-setting framework that the CEO and the rest of the C-suite use, not just an engineering goal.
Exactly. They integrated key DevEx improvements into the company's overall strategic objectives. This wasn't just an engineering team setting a goal. These were company-wide, executive-sponsored objectives that engineering contributed to.
What kind of DevEx initiatives were elevated to this level and tied to executive OKRs? Can you give examples?
Sure. The source material mentions examples such as specific targets for reducing the average lead time for changes across the organization.
Okay, that's a core metric we talked about.
Clear goals for improving new hire onboarding metrics, like that time to first merge we discussed. Or measurable objectives related to the reliability and adoption of key internal platform services.
So instead of an engineering manager saying, we need to improve lead time, it becomes the CEO or COO saying, our OKR is to reduce lead time by 20%, and improving the CI/CD DevEx is a key initiative to get us there. That's a different conversation.
That's the fundamental shift. By tying DevEx improvements directly to goals that executives are responsible for, it elevates their importance and the impact, according to the source.
Yeah, what happened?
Tying DevEx to executive-level goals suddenly unlocked the necessary cross-team support, resources, and organizational priority that engineering had previously struggled to secure. When DevEx metrics and initiatives are on the executive dashboard and tied to company performance goals, they get the attention and investment they deserve.
It moves DevEx from being perceived as a departmental operational cost to a strategic investment in the entire company's future capability and velocity. It needs to be visible, sponsored, and prioritized at the highest levels to truly succeed.
It needs to be recognized as a core lever for business growth and innovation, not just an engineering problem to be managed. The source calls it the missing link for truly unlocking the revolution.
Wow. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive, all driven by the source material you brought to us. We started by defining DevEx not just as tools, but as the entire ecosystem impacting a developer's ability to do great work, the very foundation of engineering output.
And we saw why this concept has jumped from the engineering team to the boardroom, driven by the realization that business execution is software execution. And friction in development directly impacts time to market and competitive edge, as demonstrated by that SaaS company's dramatic ROI from platform investment. Remember, 4 weeks to 2 days.
Incredible. We explored how dedicated platform engineering teams are building internal products to create paved roads and guardrails, freeing up product teams and significantly accelerating time to contribution. Like that e-commerce firm's onboarding improvements allowing first PRs on day 2.
And we saw how critical that first impression is, with onboarding serving as a microcosm of overall DevEx quality and how optimizing it, like the fintech company reducing time to first merge by 65%, yields massive benefits in productivity and early engagement.
Crucially, we discussed the human element, that poor DevEx isn't just inefficient, it's a significant retention risk, driving away valuable talent, especially senior engineers, as shown by that unicorn startup's exit interviews revealing frustration was the key driver.
We learned that simply adding more tools isn't the answer and can lead to counterproductive tool sprawl, like that enterprise's CI/CD hell, emphasizing that coherence and integrated experience matter more than the quantity of features.
Right, coherence over quantity. We looked at how you can actually measure DevEx, blending quantitative metrics like deployment frequency and lead time with qualitative data like developer satisfaction, using tools like a DevEx scorecard to reveal bottlenecks and guide investment.
We explored the vital mindset shift needed, applying product management principles to internal tools, treating internal developers as customers, building roadmaps and collecting feedback, leading to internal platforms being used with the same trust as external products.
We touched on the complex role of AI, seeing that LLMs can accelerate DevEx and productivity, but only when built on a solid foundation of good engineering practices, otherwise risking the amplification of technical debt. Don't paper over the cracks.
Exactly. And finally, we highlighted that none of this truly takes root and scales without executive buy-in, requiring DevEx to be elevated to a strategic priority, tied to executive-level goals and sponsored from the top, moving it from an engineering wish list to a business imperative.
You've really brought to light, through these sources, a fundamental and ongoing transformation in how successful technology organizations are built and run. This isn't just theory. The use cases provide concrete, measurable evidence of the profound impact DevEx has on speed, quality, cost, and talent. Understanding this deep dive provides you, the listener, a powerful lens to analyze any software development environment you encounter, whether you're building in it, leading it, or interacting with its outcomes.
It offers a framework for identifying why some organizations seem effortlessly fast and innovative, while others feel perpetually bogged down, despite hiring talented people. It's often the underlying DevEx that makes the crucial difference.
And it leaves us with a provocative thought to consider, building on that final point from the source material about human-centered productivity, flow, and autonomy. If improving developer experience is fundamentally about removing friction and enabling people to do their best work efficiently, what's the single biggest point of friction in your own development environment?
What's your personal bottleneck?
What's one thing, big or small, that if changed or improved would have the most significant positive impact on your ability or your team's ability to get into and stay in that state of productive flow, solving problems instead of fighting the system?
Is it a slow build, confusing documentation, a painful deployment process, lack of clear internal APIs, a clunky tool integration? What does your daily experience tell you is the real bottleneck holding back you and your team's full potential? Identifying that single biggest point of friction, that's often the most high-leverage place to start advocating for change.
Something powerful to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the DevEx revolution.